The room was a sea of champagne flutes and expectant smiles. Everyone was waiting for the bride's speech, for the tears, the thank yous, the happy platitudes. They had no idea this wasn't a speech. It was a forensic audit. My eyes found my maid of honor, my sister Chloe. Her smile was blinding. Practiced. Perfect. I raised the microphone, the metal cool against my fingers, and let the silence settle. Chloe, I began, my voice perfectly even. You taught me so much about finances. For example, how a single swift code can tell a story. And your story? It's fascinating to understand how my wedding speech became an indictment. You have to go back 12 hours to the moment the perfect life I had built came crashing down. The night before my wedding should have been filled with giddy anticipation. I was feeling sentimental, so I decided to drop off a small personal gift at my sister's house, where my parents were staying. I let myself in with my old key, the silence of the house feeling warm and familiar. I called out their names, but the only answer was the low murmur of voices coming from the study. I recognized them immediately. First was my sister, Chloe, the family's golden child whose charisma could charm a room into anything. Then my father, a man who saw her as his legacy, and my mother, a woman who always chose the path of least resistance, which always led straight to Chloe. I froze in the hallway, the gift box suddenly heavy in my hands. Chloe's voice was smug, confident. The final payment to the venue is due by 10:00 a.m. When her card gets declined, the whole thing gets cancelled. There was a pause. Liam's family will see what a financial train wreck she is. He'll finally walk. My father's sigh was a weak little puff of air. Are you sure? Chloe. It feels so drastic. But my mother's voice was firm. Righteous. Avon. It's for her own good. She's not responsible enough for a marriage like this. We moved the money to your account. Chloe. It's safe. It's a hard lesson. But a necessary one. A hard lesson. The words echoed in the sudden ringing in my ears. This wasn't just an insult or a moment of jealousy. This was a coordinated attack. A meticulous plan for my complete and utter public humiliation, orchestrated by my entire family. Every dismissed achievement, every time I was called too sensitive, every comparison to Chloe's effortless success. It all clicked into place. This was what they thought of me. A problem to be managed. A lesson to be taught. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat, and slipped out the door without a sound. The cold night air hit me, but I barely felt it. The gift box fell from my numb fingers and landed on the wet pavement with a soft thud. I just left it there. To really understand the chasm that opened in my sister's hallway, you have to understand the two lives I was living. In one life, I was a Lara Jensen, the quiet, slightly disappointing younger daughter, the one with the confusing, boring job, and the tendency to be, well, a little too serious. In the other life, I was a lead analyst for a global anti-corruption task force, a name that carried a quiet weight in rooms my family couldn't even imagine. For years, I kept those worlds separate, thinking it was easier that way. I was wrong. It just gave their false narrative room to grow into something monstrous. I remember about a year before the wedding, my parents threw a massive dinner party for Chloe. The occasion, she'd been given a 2% raise, and the title of senior marketing associate at the local firm she worked for. My father, a man who measured success in legible titles and company cars, was practically bursting with pride. He raised a glass of expensive champagne, praising her financial savvy and real-world business acumen. The whole family applauded, beaming at Chloe, as if she'd just cured a disease. I sat there smiling politely, but in my head, the mental tally was running. I saw the academic decathlon I won that they missed for one of Chloe's soccer games. I saw the prestigious internship I secured that my dad called a waste of a good summer. It was a familiar feeling, the quiet eraser of my reality in favor of hers. Their world only had enough sunlight for one golden child, and I had learned to live in the shade. Just a few weeks after that dinner, I was given lead duties on a case we'd been building for 3 years. It was a massive international asset forfeit investigation, targeting a network that laundered money for rogue states. It was the biggest professional achievement of my life. I tried cautiously to share the news during our weekly phone call. I explained that my analysis had been the key to unlocking the whole thing. My father listened, and I could hear the disinterest in the silence. When I finished, he just chuckled. "That's nice. Sweetie," he said, the condescension dripping from every word. "All those numbers and spreadsheets, just don't forget to defrag your hard drive." That's when the nickname started. Whenever I'd try to talk about work, Chloe would roll her eyes and say, "Oh, here goes Ellie Data again." They had taken the most complex, demanding part of my life and turned it into a joke. A cute, nerdy hobby. This was the pattern. Stretching back as long as I could remember, it was a system of carefully curated realities. When Chloe maxed out 3 credit cards in her first year of college on clothes and parties, my parents bailed her out, calling it a vital learning experience about budgeting. But when I won a full academic scholarship to a top university, they told me I was lucky and warned me not to get a big head. As if my hard work was an unearned lottery ticket, their approval was a resource and it was allocated entirely to her. My achievements were inconvenient truths that complicated their simple story of a perfect daughter. And the other one? My other life, my real life, was a universe away from their suburban drama. It existed in a high-security digital forensics lab, a place so sterile and quiet you could hear the hum of the servers breathing. My world wasn't spreadsheets. It was the silent, brutal art of following dirty money through the dark corners of the global financial system. I didn't just look at numbers. I hunted predators who used those numbers to fund wars and destabilize economies. My colleagues and I spoke a language my family would never comprehend, a staccato shorthand of risk and consequence. I remember the exact moment I broke the big case. I was staring at 3 glowing monitors, my mind a whirlwind of data points that refused to connect. Then I saw it. "The layering is obvious," I said to my team, the pieces clicking into place. They used a double invoicing scheme through a shell corporation in a non-cooperative jurisdiction, but they got sloppy. The IP address that authorized the final transfer resolves back to a server in their main office. A beat of silence, and then we have them. It was a quiet, electric moment of victory. There was no champagne, no loud celebration, just the grim, profound satisfaction of a difficult job done right. My work didn't just affect a company's bottom line. It had real, tangible consequences. Later that week, I was called into the office of Director Madsen, my superior, a woman whose praise was as rare and valuable as a flawless diamond. She was sharp, no nonsense, and one of the most respected figures in our field. She didn't ask me to sit. She just looked at me from across her vast desk, a thick file in her hands. "Your analysis just dismantled a network that's been evading sanctions for a decade," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, but heavy with meaning. Exceptional work. In that single understated sentence, I felt more seen and respected than I had in my entire life with my family. Here in this world of secrets and stakes, I wasn't Ellie Data. I was one of the best. My competence wasn't a strange little quirk. It was a weapon, and I was about to be forced to aim it at my own family. For years, I let them define me in their world with their rules. But after what I overheard, I wasn't just a daughter or a sister anymore. I was an investigator, and my own family had just become my next case. Back in my hotel room, the shock finally gave way to a flood of hot, angry tears. But they didn't last long. It was as if a switch flipped in my brain. The heartbroken daughter receded, and the analyst took over. The crying stopped and something else took its place. An icy, familiar calm. The same focus I felt when I was hunting a target through layers of shell corporations. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was messy, emotional. This was about a correction backed by irrefutable data. I opened my personal encrypted laptop. My wedding dress hung on the closet door, a white ghost in my peripheral vision. But I ignored it. I didn't need access to the AY's restricted systems for this. I was simply following my own money. My fingers flew across the keyboard, launching the forensic accounting software I knew so well. I began mapping the digital breadcrumbs of the transaction I'd made to the venue. There it was, the authorized transfer, the electronic intercept, and the rerouting. The money hadn't vanished. It had been redirected to a newly opened high-interest savings account. The account holder's name was listed in plain, stark text. Klu Jensen. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Out of pure professional abid. A reflex. I couldn't have stopped if I tried. I ran a quick analysis on the account's history. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a new account opened just for my wedding funds. There was a pattern. Small but regular transfers from our parents' retirement account, stretching back for over 2 years. My sister hadn't just tried to sabotage my wedding. She was methodically draining our parents' future. My first call was to my fiancé Liam. I didn't cry or scream. I laid out the facts calmly, concisely, like I was delivering a security briefing. He was silent on the other end. And for a terrifying second I thought, but then his voice came low and furious. "The wedding is happening," he said, the anger not directed at me. "But for me? The venue gets paid. I'll handle it. You handle them." One call from him, and a wire transfer from his investment account, secured everything. The sabotage was neutralized. The trap was now set. With that settled, I began preparing my evidence. I created a simple, clean, utterly damning presentation. Just 2 slides. One showing the wedding fund transfer. The other, the 2-year history of theft from our parents. No emotion, no embellishment, just dates, accounts, and amounts. The wedding would go on. The flowers would be perfect. The music would play. My family would walk in expecting to see me broken. They didn't understand. The venue wasn't the stage for my humiliation. It was the stage for their reckoning. Walking into my own wedding reception felt like entering a different dimension. Everything was perfect. The flowers, the music, the soft glow of the lighting. My husband Liam held my hand tightly. A silent anchor in a swirling sea of familiar, treacherous faces. My family was there, clustered together near the head table. I could see the confusion wearing with their smugness. They couldn't understand how this was all happening, how the public humiliation they'd engineered had simply evaporated. They masked their unease with forced bright smiles, playing the part of the proud, happy family. It was a masterful performance. But I knew the truth. The speeches began. My father-in-law was warm and wonderful. Liam's best man was hilarious. And then it was Chloe's turn. She glided to the microphone. Every inch the perfect doting made of honor. Her speech was a masterpiece of saccharine lies. She spoke of our unbreakable sisterly bond of childhood memories I barely recognized, painting a picture of a life where she was my constant protector and guide. She ended by looking right at me, her eyes shining with fake tears. "I will always look out for you, Ara," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The crowd sighed, captivated. My parents beamed, their faces shining with a pride so profound it was almost painful to watch. I just smiled, a calm, placid smile, and applauded along with everyone else. Then it was my turn. Liam squeezed my hand one last time as I stood up. A hush fell over the room. I felt 200 pairs of eyes on me as I walked to the small podium, my steps even, and measured. I didn't feel nervous. I felt clear. I placed my small clutch on the lectern, took out the tiny USB drive, and inserted it into the laptop connected to the projector. The slideshow of happy childhood photos, Liam and me, our friends, our lives, froze and then went black. A few people murmured in confusion. I took a deep breath and smiled. I started with the easy part. I thanked my new in-laws for welcoming me into their family. I thanked our friends for traveling so far to be with us. And I thanked my incredible husband, my voice full of a genuine warmth that was meant only for him. I let the pleasantries hang in the air for a moment, letting my family relax, letting them think this was all it was going to be. Then my tone shifted, dropping just a little, becoming crisper, more precise. "A marriage," I said. My eyes finding Chloe's in the crowd is built on trust and transparency, and I've learned recently just how important it is to track your assets. Behind me, the screen flickered to life. It wasn't a photo. It was a clean, simple infographic. A flowchart. Box A was labeled Jensen Wedding Fund. Box B was labeled Chloe Jensen Private Savings. In between, a bold red arrow showed a transfer of $50, 000, complete with a date, time, and transaction ID. A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Chloe's face drain of all color, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. She looked like she'd been turned to stone. I let the image sink in before I continued, my voice as calm as if I were delivering a quarterly report. I was led to believe my final payment to this beautiful venue might not clear. I explained, my gaze sweeping the room. I was supposed to be publicly humiliated today. dismissed as a financial train wreck. I paused, then looked directly at my parents. But my job, the one my family calls my little spreadsheet hobby, is forensic auditing. My entire career is about one thing. I find the money. My eyes snapped back to Chloe. So I did. The silence in the room was absolute. A heavy, suffocating blanket. I then turned my full attention to my parents, whose faces were a mask of confused horror. You told me it was for my own good, I said, my voice softening just enough to be lethal. You said you were worried about my financial responsibility. As I spoke, I clicked the remote in my hand. The slide changed. Now, it showed a 2-year history. A steady stream of transfers from an account labeled R&S, Jensen Retirement Fund, directly into Chloe's same private account. I let them absorb the second, more devastating truth. I watched the dawning horror on my father's face as he finally understood. He wasn't just looking at a failed attempt to ruin my wedding, he was looking at his own stolen future. He was looking at the ruinous hidden cost of his golden child, the daughter they'd propped up, enabled, and endlessly celebrated, had been robbing them blind the entire time. While the daughter they dismissed as an afterthought was the only one competent enough to see it, I looked at them, my mother and my father, their perfect world crumbling into dust right in front of 200 witnesses. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound sense of finality. This was the end of their story, and the beginning of mine. You were worried about the wrong daughter. I clicked the remote, and the screen went black. I didn't need to say another word. The data had said it all. I picked up my champagne glass, raised it to my new husband, and walked off that stage, leaving the wreckage of my old family behind me. We didn't stay. There was no grand exit. No finale confrontation. As soon as I stepped off that stage, Liam was there, his hand finding mine. We simply turned, and together we walked out of the reception hall. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes and the deafening silence that had swallowed my family whole. Behind us, a life was imploding. A carefully constructed world of lies and favoritism was being torn apart by the silent, brutal force of the truth, but I wasn't part of that world anymore. Outside in the cool night air, Liam's parents were waiting for us. His mother, a woman of quiet strength and immense kindness, simply opened her arms and held me. His father put a steadying hand on my shoulder. No words were needed. In their quiet, fierce support, the message was clear and absolute. I had a family, a real one that saw me, valued me, and stood with me. Not out of obligation, but out of love. We got into the waiting car and drove away, leaving the wreckage for others to sift through. 1 year later, I was looking out a floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling historic skyline of London. The persistent gray drizzle felt cleansing, a world away from the life I'd left behind. My old apartment was gone. My old phone number was disconnected. And my old name, the one tied to that family, felt like it belonged to a different person. My new name was on the polished mahogany door behind me, Madsen Rose. And under it, my title, Director, Transatlantic Financial Crimes Task Force. I wasn't an analyst anymore. A quiet cog in a big machine. I was leading the machine. The promotion had come 6 months after the wedding, a direct result of my work, my focus, and the quiet, unshakable confidence that had settled in me after I'd finally severed the anchors that had been holding me down my whole life. My new world was one of mutual earned respect. It was a world of competence. My team was a collection of the sharpest minds from agencies around the globe. My six, the FBI, Interpol. We were a tribe, a family forged not by blood, but by a shared mission and a common language of data, integrity, and consequence. I was in the middle of a briefing, pointing to a complex network map on a large screen, when my personal phone buzzed on the corner of the conference table. I'd set up this number for emergencies, for the few people from my old life who I trusted, but it rarely ever made a sound. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number, but the text preview was all I needed to see. I excused myself for a moment, my team nodding with understanding. As I stepped into my office and closed the door, I stood there looking at the city and read the full message. It was from my father. All we have started legal proceedings against Chloe. Your mother is devastated. I was wrong about everything. I hope one day you can forgive me. I read the words once, then twice, waiting for a feeling to surface. I expected a surge of anger, or maybe the bitter tang of victory, of long overdue vindication. But nothing came. There was only a quiet, profound sense of distance. It was like reading a news report from a distant country I had once visited long ago. The names of the cities were familiar, but the conflict, the pain, the drama, it all belonged to someone else now. He was asking for my forgiveness, but what he didn't understand was that I was no longer the person who had anything left to forgive. That version of me, the daughter who AHD for his approval, who tallied every injustice in a secret ledger in her heart. She didn't exist anymore. She had walked out of that wedding reception and vanished into the night. He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to a woman who had built an entirely new life, a life so full and so far beyond their influence that his apology was an echo from a ghost. I didn't feel anger or happiness. I just felt peace. My phone was still in my hand. I could delete the message and the number, erasing the last digital ghost of my past. But that felt too angry, too emotional. Instead, I simply pressed archive. The message vanished from my screen, filed away, but not destroyed. A piece of data that was no longer relevant to my current operation. I took one last look at the London rain, then turned and walked back into the briefing room. My focus absolute, my world waiting for me. They spent my whole life telling me I was bad with money, but in the end, I was the only one who knew its true price. Integrity. And mine was never for sale. If you've ever had to use your own unique skill set to finally set a boundary, share your story in the comments. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.